Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Agentic automation isn't just the next step in automation, it's the future of how work gets done. By enabling intelligent, autonomous agents to take action, adapt, and collaborate, organizations are unlocking new levels of productivity, growth, and customer delight. Join us as we explore how agentic automation is reshaping work for the better, for customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now podcast. I'm Michael Marchuk, and in this episode, we'll be chatting with Daniel Yoo, who's the founder of FinMate. Daniel is a slacker, as we've talked earlier before as part of the show here. He only has 2 degrees from UC Berkeley, one in economics and one in molecular cell biology development genetics, and then a master's degree from Johns Hopkins in applied economics, in focusing on machine learning and AI for asset price prediction. So again, I hate to say, guys, we keep on bringing on these folks who just, they're not holding the bar here, but we'll do best we can. I'm sure he'll be okay on the conversation. Anyways, Daniel, obviously a very, very smart guy. He had worked as a financial advisor for major firms such as Equitable, TD Ameritrade, and Schwab before he transitioned over to lead FinMate, which combines his experiences in the advisor space as well as the tech space for the financial advisor community. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. And again, I'm glad you're rolling with my silliness here. You are a very, very bright guy, and I really appreciate you being on here. So since you've been able to see how AI is transforming some of the financial services stuff, I thought this would be a really good conversation because from your experience as both a financial advisor and a tech entrepreneur, you're getting to see this stuff up close. So how do you see AI reshaping this whole advisor-client relationship, especially in terms of the trust and the personalization that we've seen going on?
Yeah, I would view AI in our industry in basically 2 ways. One is behind the scenes and one is in front of the scenes. Obviously, what we're working on is mostly behind the scenes where advisors, clients don't actually really see us or know who we are. And we kind of like to keep it that way. Just make sure that the advisor has good branding in front of their clients. We don't need to be branded in front of them. And so in that situation, all we're really helping out with is the operational processing workflows of the advisor so that they can be more present in front of the clients, right? And so it's less about us kind of enabling, doing specific things for the client, but it's just us freeing up the advisor to be more present. And then on the other hand, there are those platforms that will be focusing on the direct communication to clients, right? So, personalization, email communication, reminders, things like that. And so, there's just 2 ways to think about it in that question.
So from the client advisory relationship, so that you take that relationship, which is typically a very personal thing. I get to know you, you get to know me. There's a lot of discussion related to what my goals are as a client, and you come back with as an advisor talking through some of these things. How does AI play a role within that relationship, or does it?
Yeah, I think it does help. When you're an advisor sitting in a meeting, you have many goals that you're trying to accomplish all at once, right? Number one, you have to lead the discussion into a positive direction, right? You want them to learn to trust you, trust their information to you, trust the advice you're going to give. So there's that rapport building piece. There's also a data collection piece where they're trying to, get information from you so that they can present to you some suggestions, a roadmap forward. Right, they're paying attention to your emotional cues, right? Where's your concerns? What are you happy about? What are you sad about? So that they can kind of understand you in a deeper emotional level that way. So there's a lot happening in a meeting, and I'm speaking from experience. It's a lot to process all at once, right? And so add to that, note taking. Add to that some of the other operational work stuff. Your focus is split in about 4 or 5 different directions at once, and so. What we're trying to do, at least, is to remove some of the cognitive burden, let's say, on the advisor during the meeting, post-meeting, so that the advisor can shift more of their brain power to that personal aspect. And so I think that's where we're finding success is in enablement. We're not trying to necessarily replace the advisor-client experience with AI, although I am pretty certain that's going to be becoming more and more relevant as the months roll by.
I can imagine. I mean, this sounds like a lot like how doctors are starting to leverage AI to support their relationships with their patients. Because if anyone's been to a doctor lately, the majority of the time they spend facing their computer typing things in, and then they'll ask you a few questions, then go back to typing again as part of the care that you receive. So I imagine this can help kind of reverse that. Instead of going back to the computer or going back to your note taking or being able to support that, there's a different way you can approach it and again remain that rapport, that relationship piece, and let AI kind of do some of that heavy lifting in the background. When you start talking about the discussions that you may have, especially in the context of an advisor-client relationship, likely there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes out. Hey, we're talking, let's say pretty personal stuff. Hey, I want to save for this year. I've got X amount of dollars in my account now. These are the investments I'm looking for. I've got a risk tolerance that I'm not really sure about. I don't like when we have heavy things going on in the market, or boy, I need to be aggressive because I have these big lofty goals I want to save for in some period of time. So all this things, God, this ends up being somewhat like a therapy session. It's from a financial perspective.
Yes.
How do you take all of that data that's sort of coming out in these kinds of discussions and protect it? Because as AI is listening and learning and understanding some of these things here, there could be a perception that, well, I'm not sure I want to have that data out there. I'm talking to you about it, and I understand that you're going to be confidential, but I'm not really sure about the AI. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's something that the industry is going to have to grapple with more and more as we go. We've taken the unpopular route of saying we're going to delete all data. I know most AI companies out there by default will keep your data. They'll let you delete it if you ask, but the default is to keep it. A reason we've gone with no data retention, as well as when we connect to our advisors' core systems like their client relationship management software, we don't pull data from there, is because we want to be a simple, lightweight tool, right? And so we have a very strict no training policy, no learning policy, full deletion, just in case things happen. Financial industry historically has been a very slow industry to adopt new tech because it is fairly conservative. I have actually been very, very surprised at the speed in which a lot of these firms are adopting new tech. I guess because AI is just such a hot topic, I think a lot of firms are jumping into it, perhaps too quickly. I'm not sure that the existing compliance departments are well equipped to understand the implications of what they're approving.
Yeah, that kind of gets into what I wanted to ask you next, which is, as these financial institutions are making these investments, and they've got some of their initial goals and their initial thoughts they've had, and they're also seeing there's additional power, so they can say, well, maybe we can add this and create some more personalization or more intuitive ways to engage with us and whatnot. But as we start doing that, we start maybe crossing some of those lines. You mentioned before, like, hey, maybe this may replace advisors, replace parts of what advisors do, but maybe not in a good way, because when you talk about relationships that last for years or decades, in a relationship management perspective, these advisors have gotten to know folks through their childbearing years, and then they've grown up and they've gone through some of their kids to college, and now they're helping them prepare for retirement, et cetera. So these are very long-term relationships. How do you see AI impacting that? And is there any more, like more intuitive way or a good way to approach it from a customer experience perspective that doesn't diminish from that relational aspect?
Right. I do think you're right in that there is a potential downside on the degradation of that relationship. But again, I think it depends on how it's implemented, right? And there's two ways to go about something like this, right? Traditionally, to have that long-term stable relationship, the client needs to be at a certain financial place for it to make sense for an advisor to take you on as a client, right? Historically, there's been minimums, right? $500,000 to $1 million of assets under management with the advisor, because ultimately the advisor needs to still make money and provide a living for himself and his family. I think what a lot of this technology is starting to unlock is for clients under that high net worth threshold, let's say $1 million of investable assets, to be able to have access to financial advisors, right? If you're under the $1 million mark, let's say you're in the growth phase, you don't have that much money to put away. it just had the amount of work that it takes to provide the advising hasn't been worth it. But with a lot of these tools, with virtual meeting assistants, virtual meetings itself, like platforms where advisors don't necessarily need to book in-person meetings, it's unlocking this ability for the underserved folks to be able to get financial advice if they wish to do so. On the other hand, as well, for people that don't necessarily want a person, right? I think we're seeing a rise of a lot of robots kind of advising people in general, right? So, 10, 15 years ago, we're seeing the rise of robo advisors that just invest for you, not necessarily provide kind of financial planning advice. And so I think the newer generations might not want a human as much as I think the older generations did, right? Which then allows for AI and other technologies to maybe replace the advisor experience. And so I think there'll be a fracturing of the industry where more options will be on the table and you can kind of find the advisor that fits your needs, whether it's like the super heavy traditional, I get to know you and your family and your life for over 30 years, all the way to the other spectrum of there's no actual human on the other end. It's just a robot giving you advice.
Yeah. You bring up two different things that I want to go, because I think both of them are interesting. One of them, you mentioned that, there's that threshold for a traditional advisor to take someone on because of the amount of work, et cetera, and the fact that you typically, in general, and maybe I'm generalizing, in the past, you met in person. You had that kind of relationship over a desk or over coffee or something like that. Now, potentially with virtual meetings and other things, you can theoretically allow that advisor to add more meetings to his workload during the day virtually. Do you think AI can support that from a workload perspective to allow either the threshold to be dropped or for that advisor to take on more clients?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I think that's exactly the kind of position we're finding ourselves in is AI automations are there to help with the operational burden be lowered. And so it could be one or the other, right? So it depends on if the advisor is part of a big conglomeration and then they're pushed to optimize further, take on more clients, right? Could be that. If it's a mom and pop shop, right? Small business owner, advisor, right? Maybe it's a lifestyle business. Maybe they don't want to work as long, hey, use AI tools and automations to make your existing book of business easier to service. We might talk about this later today, but I think that over-reliance on virtual meetings could lead to a potential replacement of the advisor experience. And so my prediction is that I think we're going to see a bifurcation of the industry where it goes splits between very high touch, high support, high personal relationship versus the very, very automated. And I think the middle will get hollowed out.
Yeah. So the second part kind of touches on that, which is when you have this bifurcation, I am in my mind visualizing it along sort of the generational lines. So we have sort of the boomers and the Gen Xers who are very much into the high touch relational kind of discussion versus the millennials and the Gen Zs who are very comfortable with leveraging a more impersonal kind of relationship. When you start looking at that transition, then how can an advisor right now prepare for sort of what we're seeing as this inevitability of this bifurcation?
Yeah, it depends, again, I think, on where you're at. In the financial advisory industry right now, there's been a ton of consolidation driven by mostly private equity and venture capital dollars. It spiked a couple of years ago. I think it's starting to spike again with the valuations having some crazy multiples. And so you as the advisor, it depends also on where in your career you are at, right? Are you like early stage career where you're just building your book of business versus are you more established? If you're more established, then the options are, do you sell or do you want to keep it as a lifestyle business, right? And if you want to keep it as a lifestyle business, hey, I'm sure most of your client base are your previous generation folks. And then your job is then to transition it down to your clients' kids, right? I do think as the millennials and Gen Z generation ages, there will be more desire for a personal touch. I think there's a ton of research out there saying that, Gen Z millennials are kind of the loneliest generation. And so while on the surface, they have gone to the impersonal computer as a means of communication, I think as the years go on, I think people are going to want more of a human touch element. But again, that's dependent on how much AUM you can bring to the table, right? Because as much as people would want to service everybody, everyone has a limited amount of time a day. And then if you're a younger advisor, you're just building your book of business and your practice, I see a lot of them jumping headfirst into building out a robust tech stack to be able to service those kind of low dollar clients and hopefully grow with them. That is one way to do it. I think that's probably the easier way to get your foot in the door, but I do think that runs the risk of just being replaced by a full robotic system. So yeah, no real answers, no easy solutions, unfortunately.
No, and obviously this is all changing pretty dynamically as we go here. So as we look at that change and that sort of evolution with the AI tools that we're seeing, as it become more sophisticated, how can financial services firms or advisors make sure that their solutions remain accessible and usable for advisors who may not be super tech savvy? I mean, not everyone's like you who's gone through and been an advisor, has been around in a bunch of different things, been trained in both financial as well as technology stuff to be able to understand it all. There may be folks who are very financially literate, but not necessarily as technical, or very technical, but not necessarily as financially literate. So how do you bridge those two together where you have an advisor who's coming to the table and is like, hey, I understand this, and I really understand what's best for specific folks. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that's the big question that's going to have to be answered in the next 6 to 12 months. Thanks to the glut of venture capital private equity dollars that's available, as well as all of these massive tech layoffs happening, we're seeing a flood of tech folks coming into our industry, creating tons of these AI tools backed by a lot of venture capital dollars with very, very inflated valuations. And so the question that my clients have currently been coming to me and asking is like, hey, Daniel, we know you get the industry, we know you get the technology. What do we do? Right. And it's a hard question to answer because, again, I think the only people that are equipped to answer that is people with both backgrounds. And so one of the directions that I'm taking FinMate is more on the consultative side, where we are helping advisory firms understand the landscape and develop and implement AI solutions for their operational workflow. We started off as a very simple, AI note taker for advisors. It's a platform service, right? You can sign up and you can just kind of mildly configure it for your uses. But I think the future of AI is in bringing that expertise into something that's actually digestible, right? One of the focuses we have inside FinMate is that ease of usage, right? Having been in the industry, I know that not everyone is very technically savvy. So we want to make the experience as simple and easy to use as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as this is evolving, things are going to appear, and we're going to see, as we've seen all these new startups that have started to create very interesting and compelling solutions that are addressing very specific issues within either advisors or the financial services world in general. What new services or business models even do you foresee advancing as we see Gen AI become more integrated, especially for some of these mid-market and some of the startups that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's going to be a bloodbath in the next year or two. There's just too many, as well as these valuations don't make any sense, right? Again, like post-Corona era, I know personally some folks that have tried to start venture capital firms that have returned their capital back pre-AI because they just couldn't find anything to invest in, right? So there's been a ton of dry powder waiting in the wings. And now that AI has become such a hot topic, just money is coming flooding in. And some of the valuations that these startups are getting are pretty crazy. And I don't think it's sustainable, right? And so I think we're going to see a collapse, consolidation, because again, if put yourself in the shoes of an advisor, right? There's 20 of these tools doing 30 different things. What do you pick? How do you integrate them, right? And because these are all so new, it's not really a cohesive whole. And so I think there's going to be a consolidation and a bloodbath, and I think a lot of these are going to go by the wayside. I think the real differentiator is going to be on people who understand the industry and can provide a cohesive solution. And so that's frankly where we're taking our company.
Do you see sort of the PE firm consolidation piece working in favor of legitimizing some of these smaller firms who, as you mentioned, an RIA may be out there looking at 15 different things that all sound identical, to solve a real problem, but they're not really sure which one to go with, versus going with more of an established player that has now added on, which may be an acquisition of one of these smaller players, but has actually legitimized it. Do you see that as being one of the ways that this could move forward and actually gain more traction?
It could be, but I think the PEs are also a little bit wary, potentially, of just betting everything on one horse, right?
Sure.
And so, yeah, it's a tricky situation for everyone involved because people know that there's money to be made, but because the competition has skyrocketed all of a sudden, right? I mean, a couple months ago, even we were hearing about like DeepSeek as this like crazy new AI from China, but then word on the street from inside China as well is that DeepSeek is getting outcompeted already, right? So from all the way up and down the chain, from people that are generating these foundational models to people like me who are creating product-oriented solutions, it's a bloodbath out there. And so yeah, I don't know if anyone's really, really confident anymore. And so we'll see.
So when you start talking about some of the future looking, we talked about the in-person meetings versus digital only. Do you see a new service that could come out of this that could blend those two in a way that makes sense, or that allows maybe smaller investors to get access to the knowledge or the experience from a registered investment advisor or some other folks in the financial industry, where they couldn't have got it before, but do it in a way where it's sort of a ramp?
Yeah, I think there could be a ramp, but again, my prediction is that there's going to be a splitting of the industry. Or again, you have the high-end, white glove, high touch human interaction folks, and then you're going to have kind of the massive service-oriented model with AI as being the general face-to-face connection. One of the common themes you'll see in private equity kind of deals is cutting headcount, right? This is how PEs generally try to, cut costs, raise valuations. So what ends up happening with a lot of these consolidations of RIAs and investment firms is advisors get cut, right? And so they're trying to push their advisors to service more clients with less time. And so the logical conclusion of that is no more advisors, right? It's just people managing AI to be able to provide some advice. And so I don't know if there's going to be a ramp bridge across. The only way to kind of cross that bridge is if you go through some of this basic advisors, AI advisors, build up enough wealth that some of the white glove folks will take you in. But yeah, I'm not really seeing a natural ramp there. And to be frank, I'm not a fan of how VCs generally do business, and so we have not taken any funding.
Gotcha. Understood. Yeah. So what do you see next as we look into your crystal ball? And I know most of the crystal balls aren't really great for after about 3 weeks in this time frame. But if you were to look out for, into the future, where do you see the integration of AI, some of these newer technologies that you've seen and you are developing yourself, working their way into an advisor's space?
Yeah. So again, for the white glove experience, I think a lot of the back end work will start to get automated away, right? There's already some automations, but again, the state of back end tech in advising companies, especially larger ones, are pretty poor right now. Back when I was at TD, when we were opening up client accounts, even I was faxing things to our back office for processing. and this was just a couple of years ago. And so, yeah, faxing in post 2020, crazy. But I think AI has some real capability to be able to automate away a lot of the back office labor. And then, like we were discussing throughout this podcast, for the direct to consumer advisor client experience, I think there's going to be a lot more AI advisors that come into play with big flashing disclaimers. This is not financial advice because AIs can't get, licensed, right? But when the AI service for advising is very cheap, I'm not sure if people will necessarily care about that, especially if you're just in the growth phase of your wealth accumulation journey. And so, yeah, that's kind of the two ways I see. Just a lot of back office B2B operational optimization, and then on the direct consumer B2C side, a lot more robo advisors that are AI powered.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us your insights and helping us to understand how AI is really transforming the way that advisors are working with their clients as well as their own back office activities. So thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.